Spurgeon here with RevZilla, and today I'm on top of BMW's new nineT Scrambler. I was up in Brooklyn for the launch of this motorcycle and was able to steal one and bring it back down here to Philadelphia so we could ride it for this review. So at face value, this bike looks very similar to what you'd expect with the nineT. However, BMW's made some significant changes to the Scrambler, and that's what we're going to dive into in this review today. So let's get started.
So with the introduction of this new nineT Scrambler, BMW has doubled the amount of heritage motorcycles in their lineup to 2. You now have the nineT, and just below that you're going to have the Scrambler. And I say just below it because BMW has made some significant changes. At face value, the two bikes look very similar, but what you're getting with the Scrambler is a different tank, different frame, different brakes, different suspension, and different wheels, which is going to set this bike apart from its older brother, and it's going to come in $2,100 less. The MSRP on this bike, $13,000. And this is going to be a significant talking point for the Scrambler because BMW has already issued a press release. 2 new bikes are coming next year, and they're going to share this setup, not the setup of the nineT. And this is going to allow BMW to give you a lower cost of entry for their R line of motorcycles, and they're hoping to see that line expand. And I say this because BMW also gave us some other facts about the nineT. Nearly 10% of the people that bought that motorcycle bought it as their first bike. And my guess is, by lowering the price, that's a number that BMW is hoping to see expand even further. Now, my biggest concern here is for new riders that are looking at this motorcycle, they're seeing the Scrambler name, and they're thinking, man, I can buy that bike and I can go ride off in the distance down some dusty trail. This is a street bike. This is a street bike that has available spoked and knobby tires. BMW has said as much, so just keep that in mind. Now, if you are already out there and you're familiar with riding a larger ADV bike off-road, yeah, you can take this bike out, you can blast through some off-road situations down a gravel road or a dirt road and have some fun, but it's really not the appropriate machine for that. But here at RevZilla, we're all about being inappropriate, so we're gonna do just that. When I got back last weekend from the release, I put on my dirt gear, I went out to the Pine Barrens, and I blasted this thing around off-road to show you exactly why you shouldn't do the same thing. So check out that footage right now.
Alright, so I am out here in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey on the BMW Scrambler to talk about the fact that this might not be the most appropriate choice for this style of riding. And I say inappropriate, I don't say impossible, and I don't say not fun. It's just that there's probably better bikes out there for you to choose from. Now, if you are familiar with riding bigger bikes off-road and you're looking at the Scrambler, it's something you can do for a camping trip or something like that where some light adventure will take you down a gravel or a dirt road, yeah, you can do it. Just be, cognizant of the fact that this is not going to give you the same type of off-road prowess as your ADV machine would do. Even now, as I'm hitting some of this sand, I'm sliding around a little bit, and it's getting a little bit tricky. You're probably going to go ahead and make sure you opt for the cross-spoke wheels. I did bend a mag wheel when I was at the launch for BMW, so just keep that in mind. You're probably going to want to get some crash protection, at least a skid plate if nothing else. And I also went ahead and I put some stomp grip tape on this because of the fact that, actually we'll go this way. Woo! Because of the fact that the tank is super slippery. My real problem here is for the folks that don't necessarily know what they're doing. New riders that are going to look at this as the vessel for their maiden voyage off-road, and I think that would probably be a mistake in the fact that the Scrambler is still a heavy machine. Even at 485 pounds, the seating position isn't conducive to being able to stand up on the motorcycle. So let's say we work our way out of these woods and we'll find some more appropriate roads to ride. Woohoo!
So as you can see, in spite of the fact that you can get available Karoo 3 tires and cross-spoke rims with this bike, it's probably not the most appropriate machine to tackle off-road riding. However, it does make a really appropriate street bike that carries through some retro lines that we haven't seen from BMW in quite some time. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to hit the tarmac and we're going to talk about how this bike performs and what you can expect from the changes that we've seen over the nineT. Now, while I'm doing that, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to keep up with all the wild hijinks we're getting into here at RevZilla.com. Let's go for a ride.
So as you saw out there, the Scrambler might not be the most appropriate tool for the job for riding off-road, but on-road, however, it's a different story. And BMW has made some significant changes to this platform over the R9T, and that's really what I want to dive into right now. So Lem had written an article about the heritage line of Beamers that we can expect for next year, and a lot of comments started rolling through from folks that were concerned that BMW was watering down what was the R9T, and I want to dispel some of those rumors right now. BMW has really done some things to kind of make this a more appropriate street bike, and I want to start by talking about the brakes. Take a look at the brakes down there. The Scrambler is now going to utilize axial-mounted Brembo calipers on this bike, and that's going to be a change from the giant monoblocks found on the R9T. Those monoblocks were overkill for a bike putting out this kind of power on the street. So what you have now is BMW was able to cut costs a little bit, but the brakes are still appropriate in stopping this down. You've got adjustable levers for both the brake and the clutch. You've got steel braided lines. You got ABS, which is switchable with the push of a button. So there's nothing really watered down here. It's just a more appropriate setup that allowed them to save some money. Now you'll also notice down there, this is going to be mounted to a 19-inch front wheel. This is going to be a change over what we're seeing with the R9T, which had a 17-inch front rim. And mag wheels are going to be standard. Our bike is going to be outfitted with the optional cross-spoke wheels. And what's cool about the cross-spoke wheels that the R9T doesn't have is the cross spokes are tubeless, which means you don't have to worry about running a tube or patching a tube if you get a flat tire. That 19-inch front wheel is also going to come into play with the overall geometry of this motorcycle, because you now have a 60.1-inch wheelbase, and they've changed the rake angle. You now have a 28.5-degree rake, and you can really see how that front end almost stretches out. There's also a non-adjustable steering damper down there. All of this is going to come into play for what BMW calls their neutral handling. But I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to say the handling on this is extremely vague, and it's very heavy-handed. You have to put a lot of your own rider weight into this when you're trying to get it through tighter twisties and around town. Now, at highway speeds or on longer sweepers, there's a lot of stability here, but I would have loved to have seen at least some adjustability out of that steering damper. Now, the suspension, you'll notice it no longer has the telescopic upside-down front fork. It's just a regular telescopic fork. Still 4.9 inches of travel, no adjustability up front. Out back, you're going to have a Sachs unit, which is still adjustable for preload, but you no longer have adjustments for damping. The suspension throughout is really geared for a rider of my size. I'm 205 pounds, and I feel it's a really aggressive setup, very sporty in its characteristics. The one thing that you'll notice if you are a lighter rider, you might feel that the suspension comes off a bit harsh because there is no longer any adjustments for damping on the rear of this motorcycle. So the one thing that hasn't changed is going to be the engine. The engine is that same 1107-degree boxer twin that was found in the R9T, and it's probably my favorite part of the bike. This engine just has so much character to it. It just has a big feel. It's got low-end torque. You're looking at 110 horsepower, nearly 90 foot-pounds of torque. It's an appropriate street bike. The one thing to note is that with this bike, you will have shaft jacking. And while that sounds like a hilarious sexual term, it's not. Because of the way they mounted the engine in this motorcycle, it actually causes the swing arm to rise up under acceleration, and you feel like the bike is twisting a little bit on you. So where I really noticed it on this bike is under heavy acceleration with quick shifts, it felt very twitchy. So it's something you want to kind of keep aware of if you've never ridden a Boxer Twin before. And the one thing I want to say in my personal opinion is the fact that I don't really see this as a bike for new riders. I see this as a bike for maybe more veteran, experienced riders, and I don't really see this bike as fitting in with the rest of the Scrambler class. And I want to dig into that a little bit deeper. So right now I'm going to pull over, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth.
So let's back up for a second. Historically speaking, BMW is not wrong with calling this a Scrambler because, historically speaking, a Scrambler was a street motorcycle which its owners took and made it more off-road appropriate. And that's what BMW has done here. They've taken the base of the R9T, they've changed a bunch of stuff, and they've made it more appropriate for off-road use. Now the problem that I have with this is twofold. One, there's better bikes out there for that task. If you want to go off-road and on, find yourself an adventure bike or a dual sport motorcycle, and you'll be much happier with the results. Two, there's now 5 OEMs out there on the market that are utilizing the Scrambler name. You've got the Triumph Scrambler, Ducati Scrambler, Moto Guzzi Scrambler, BMW Scrambler, Yamaha calls theirs the SCR, but we know what they really mean. They mean Scrambler. And this bike doesn't fit into that fold. It's got more performance, it's got more quality, and it's got more pizzazz than those bikes are going to have. Really, if I was looking at this motorcycle, I would compare it to Triumph's T120. That's really where this bike is going to sit side by side. Both are going to be comparable in price. Both are going to be comparable when you're looking at the performance stats. Picture this bike where you've paid for the upgraded cross-spoke wheels, but now instead of the Karoo 3s, you've got the Torrent street tires on here. Both of those bikes are going to sit side by side, and that's a comparison video that I think would be much more appropriate than trying to compare this against some of those other Scramblers. Now, there's some things on this bike that I really took away enjoying. I'm a fan of the Boxer Twin. A lot of character out of this engine, a lot of power. It's a really appropriate street plant. The other thing that I really liked was the brakes and the suspension. There was a big question as to whether or not BMW was really just dumbing down the performance from a cost standpoint, and I don't think they have. What they've done is they basically said you don't need that much performance on the street for a bike that's making 110 horsepower. You don't need the big monoblock Brembos when the regular standard Brembos will do just fine. So where I think BMW stopped short, the tack on this, or the lack thereof. You got a Speedo, you got no tack, you got no fuel gauge, and you got no gear position selector. There's really not a lot going on here, and I don't think it would have been too much to ask to have that tack included as well. But the real negative componentry that I found with this is going to be the way the bike handles. They have that non-adjustable steering damper, they've increased the rake, and you really have to muscle this bike around now because the front end has a very vague feel to it. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking at the Scrambler, you're going to probably have to put a little more effort into getting this bike to go where you want to go until you get outside of the city. This is your escape vessel from the city streets out into the country roads, and once you get out in the open roads of the country, you can really have some fun with this motorcycle. So normally at this point in the review, Lemmy and I would break down exactly what we would want to modify. But the truth is, for 13 grand, BMW has given you a fantastic bike with all the refinement you'd expect. And other than opting for the cross-spoke wheels, there is nothing I would personally do to this bike. And BMW knows that it's going to be you that's going to modify these machines to make them what you want. So I'm going to flip this around on you, and I'm going to say, what modifications would you make if you were going to put this bike in your stable, and leave those in the section below. Now, head over to Common Tread if you want more information on this Scrambler. There's a complimentary article over there that I wrote giving you extra information on this bike and talking a little bit more about the roads that we traveled when we were up in Brooklyn. And always make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to keep up with all the reviews we have rolling out here at RevZilla.com. From first ride reviews like this one to full bike reviews to product reviews, we've got you covered. I want to thank you for joining us for this first ride review of BMW's new Scrambler. I'm Spurge. Enjoy the ride.